Hi, this is Andrea for Beadaholique. I'm going to teach you herringbone stitch today. Here's an example of herringbone used in a necklace, and what I did here is I sewed together 3 separate panels of herringbone, and I also added 4mm Swarovski bicones, just sewed them right in between each row as a little accent. So right now I'm just going to teach you the basics of herringbone. Of course, you're going to need a needle and thread. I'm using FireLine, and I'm using it in the 0.006 size, but I'm using white to contrast against the color beads that I chose. I've got about 1 yard on my needle, and I also have here 2 different colors of Toho seed beads, size 8/0 or 8/0. And I'm just going to begin with a ladder stitch. So if you're not already familiar with ladder stitch, go ahead and watch our video on how to do that. I'm going to be alternating my colors here. So I picked up a periwinkle bead and I picked up a gunmetal colored bead. You don't need a stopper bead for this stitch. You're just going to need to pull 2 beads down to about 8 inches away from the end. I'm going to go ahead and create a ladder of about 6 beads here. Okay, here I have my ladder of 6 beads. Always with herringbone you need an even number because your rows are rows of 2, and that's how you get that nice slanted bead look. And normally for ladder stitch, what I would do is I would go back and reinforce the ladder, making all of the beads line up really nice and neat. And actually I have done that on this necklace. As you can see, this first row is just perfectly straight and lined up next to each other. But for herringbone, you don't necessarily have to do that. So I'm just going to go ahead and start my stitch. I have a gunmetal colored bead right there, and that's where my thread is coming out of. I'm going to pick up another gunmetal colored bead, and also another periwinkle bead. And I'm going to go down through that periwinkle bead, and back up through the next bead in the row, which happens to be a gunmetal bead. I'm going to do the same thing. Pick up a gunmetal, pick up a periwinkle, go through. And this is a fun stitch because it's kind of instant gratification. You can already see the pattern forming, how those beads sit like a V. I'm going to go back up through that last pairing. And one last time, pick up a gunmetal and a periwinkle bead. Go down through that last So that's your first 2 rows right there. What I want to do, and what I do with a lot of my bead stitches, is I turn it over so I'm always working in the same direction. I want to do that in this case by taking my needle and going between those last 2 beads through that thread, catching that thread, and then go back up through both of those periwinkle beads. Then you flip your work. So I'm always working from right to left. Now, since I've got periwinkle, gunmetal, periwinkle, gunmetal, I'm going to pick up periwinkle and a gunmetal. I'm going to go through that second row gunmetal bead, But instead of going all the way down, and you're always going to have to kind of help your beads sit on top of each other so it forms a nice pattern. Instead of going all the way through all of the rows, I'm just going to go right next to it, up through that periwinkle bead. Pick up another periwinkle, pick up another gunmetal, and you can either go all the way down and pull your thread all the way through, or sometimes when it gets a little easier you can just do a shortcut and go right next to it, right through the bead directly next to it. Once again, help your beads into place. So now I have 3 rows and I want to go back up and flip my work. So I'm going to catch my thread between the 2 in the row before. I'm going to go up through those last 2 rows there. Flipping my work once more, so I'm always working right to left. I'm going to pick up a gunmetal bead because that's what row I'm working on, and then periwinkle. Go down through the second bead. You can do the shortcut, go across to the next bead. Help your beads fall into place where they're supposed to. So there I have 4 rows of herringbone stitch. And you can keep going and make it as long as you want. Make a bracelet out of it. You can, how you would finish this off is you would do a ladder stitch on the last row and join them all together so they're side by side. Or you can do what I did here and just make short segments. I made 2 segments that were 4 rows deep and 8 beads long, and 1 segment that's 8 beads long and 8 beads deep. And then all I did was I ladder stitched all 3 segments together. So once again, here's a really versatile stitch. It's a really fun stitch. I like it. I think it's very pretty. And I hope you have learned a lot and had fun. Thank you.